I was sipping coffee on my porch, savoring a quiet Saturday morning in July 2023, when my daughter's terrified scream ripped through the air. Karen, our HOA tyrant, had chained her wheelchair to the park fence like some twisted punishment. The sun was barely past its peak in Oakwood Estates, a picture-perfect suburban neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio. July 8th, 10 a.m. The community park across the street was alive. Kids squealed on the swings. The smell of grilled hot dogs wafted through the air, and families set up lawn chairs under the shade. My chipped blue ceramic mug sat beside me on the porch table, the bitter scent of coffee mingling with sunscreen and freshly cut grass. My two-story house faced the park directly. I had just leaned back in my chair when I heard it. Emily's voice, high-pitched with panic, cutting through the summer haze. "Dad, Dad." I sprang to my feet, the mug toppling and splashing hot liquid onto the wooden planks. My eyes darted across the park, locking on Emily. My 18-year-old daughter, bright, gentle and wheelchair-bound from a spinal condition, now frantically tugging at the chain wrapped around her wheelchair's wheel, tethered to the park's black iron fence. And there she was, Karen Mitchell, tailored blazer, oversized sunglasses like she was some sort of suburban Bond villain, leather purse clutched tight, and her ever-present clipboard overflowing with HOA violation slips. She stood with one hand on her hip, the chain's padlock dangling from the other like a badge of power. "I warned you," Karen snapped, her voice shrill and condescending. "Obstructing the path is a violation of Rule 17b. Maybe next time you'll think before loitering." Emily's sketchbook had fallen to the ground, pages bent, her pencil rolling into the grass. She wasn't blocking anyone. She was just sketching. She always sketched in that spot, under the elm tree, with her blue scrunchie keeping her hair out of her eyes. That wasn't loitering. That was living. I was across the lawn in seconds. "You chained my daughter to a fence," I shouted, disbelief bleeding into fury. Karen didn't flinch. "She's a hazard, Jack. This is for the community's good. File a complaint if you don't like it." She turned with a smug twist of her lips and strutted back to her silver SUV, heels clicking on the pavement. The vehicle hummed to life as she drove off like it was just another day at the HOA office. Emily's hands were shaking, her breaths short and shallow. "Dad, I didn't do anything wrong." "I know, sweetheart," I murmured, kneeling beside her. "She's going to regret this." I ran to the garage, grabbed my battered red toolbox, yanked out my bolt cutters and sprinted back. The chain clanged and scraped as I cut through it, metal falling to the ground with a final thud. I inspected the wheelchair. Scratches gouged into the armrest where the chain had rubbed against the frame. "Are you hurt?" asked. Emily shook her head, but her eyes were glassy. Around us, neighbors had stopped what they were doing. Some whispered. Others filmed with their phones. One little boy asked his mom, "Why is that lady in sunglasses so mean?" I snapped photos, close-ups of the padlock and chain, the scratches on the wheelchair, and Karen's SUV before it disappeared down the street. Every detail. The whole thing had to be documented. Then I grabbed my phone and hit Mark's number. Mark Davis, my old college buddy, now an FBI agent. "You're not going to believe what just happened," I said as soon as he picked up. "Try me," Mark replied. I explained everything in one breathless wave. "Jack, that could be false imprisonment," he said, voice low and serious. "Chain, padlock, physical restraint. It's not just HOA drama anymore. Document everything. You know the drill." "I'm on it." Emily clutched her blue scrunchie like it was a lifeline, her sketchbook now resting in her lap. She stayed silent, watching the chain lie twisted and broken in the grass. Karen had crossed a line. I stood there, fuming, heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. My daughter had done nothing wrong. She wasn't obstructing anything. She was sketching trees, for God's sake. And Karen had the audacity, the gall, to treat her like some criminal nuisance. The worst part, Karen thought she was untouchable. The security cameras, those motion-detecting ones the HOA insisted on, were humming quietly on the lamppost above. I made a mental note to request the footage. Evidence was going to be key. Ever faced an HOA bully who went too far? I said, pulling my phone back out, still recording the wreckage. Drop your wildest neighbor stories in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Porch, couch, or commute. Because this wasn't just about a chained wheelchair. This was war. Karen's chaining of Emily was outrageous. But it wasn't the first time she abused her little HOA kingdom. It was just the latest, loudest chapter in a long petty war. Since we moved into Oakwood Estates in 2021, Karen Mitchell had made it her mission to enforce every rule in the HOA handbook like it was federal law, and to invent a few of her own. She fined me $50 once for leaving the trash can out 10 minutes past 7 a.m. after collection day. Rule 12A. Another time, she sent a certified letter warning I'd face a $200 penalty unless I repainted our perfectly fine silver mailbox to approved beige. Last fall, she cornered Emily in the park, berating her for rolling too loud. My daughter, who barely makes a sound in her wheelchair, apparently disturbed the sacred suburban silence. She wasn't just a nuisance, she was a tyrant in heels. And now, on July 9th, just one day after chaining my daughter to a fence, Karen doubled down. At 9:05 a.m., an email blasted out to the entire HOA listserv. Subject: Urgent Community Safety Notice. She accused Emily of endangering park safety and claimed the chain had scratched the fence, classifying it as vandalism. The HOA was issuing us a $500 fine. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Emily vandalized the fence. She was the one chained like a bike by the tyrant in the tailored blazer. My jaw clenched. I could already hear Karen's voice ringing in her SUV. File a complaint, Jack. That evening, I marched into the HOA meeting at the clubhouse, a fluorescent-lit room with beige walls and creaky folding chairs. It felt more like a detention hall than a community space. Karen stood at the front, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her head even indoors. Bob, a retired banker with a nose for Karen's brand of order, and Susan, a realtor with a sycophantic smile, flanked her like loyal hounds. I'd like to speak, I said, standing up and holding out printed photos of the chained wheelchair, the scratched armrest, and Karen's license plate. Karen waved her clipboard like a gavel. Out of order, Jack. This is not complaint hour. Oh, it is now. I passed out the photos anyway. Some neighbors leaned in. A few gasped. One woman whispered, "She really did that?" Bob cleared his throat. Let's not jump to conclusions. Karen has maintained excellent leadership standards. Karen smirked, tapping her pen against the boardroom table. Keep pushing, Jack, and it'll get worse. That night, back at home, I called Mark again. She's escalating, I said. She wants this to go away by scaring me into silence. Mark was quiet for a beat. Then, Jack, chaining someone, even in a wheelchair, is false imprisonment. That's a serious charge under Ohio law. She doesn't get to hide behind HOA rules. Gather everything. Witnesses, photos, anything you can get. As if summoned by fury itself, Lisa Evans showed up at my door the next day. Lisa, 50, is a nurse, single mom, and one of the few neighbors Karen hadn't completely scared off. She stood on my porch, holding her phone like a prized artifact. She's out of control, Lisa said. Look at this. She played a video she recorded last month. Karen yelling about Lisa's dog barking once during a Zoom call. Your mutt's a nuisance. I'll have him removed. Lisa shook her head. She fined me $75 for that. Bill Carter joined us a few minutes later, 60, with grease-stained hands and a cap that said, Cleveland Rocks. He retired as a mechanic and now treated HOA drama like a full-time gig. He pulled a thick spiral notebook from under his arm. I've been logging Karen's fines, he said, flipping through pages filled with tidy handwriting. 47 since 2021. Christmas lights, bird feeders, American flags, one gnome. Sarah got fined $150 for that. Sarah asked, Yeah, 3 houses down. She's scared of Karen now. But she'll talk if she knows she's not alone. I nodded. We need to compile everything. I printed copies of the chain photos. Emily's scratched wheelchair, Karen's SUV, and the HOA emails. Lisa's video was uploaded to a private cloud folder. Bill's notebook became the new Bible of HOA injustice. Back inside, Emily sat in her room sketching. I watched from the doorway as she shaded in a drawing, her own wheelchair under the elm tree. She glanced at me and asked softly, "Do you think Karen will ever apologize?" I smiled, though it took effort. "No, but we're going to make sure she can't hurt anyone else." She tied her scrunchie tighter, her chin lifting just a bit. "Good." The house smelled of lavender from the candle she kept on her desk. Lisa's phone buzzed with more texts. Bill jotted notes like he was preparing for trial. Outside, Karen's silver SUV rolled slowly past our driveway, her silhouette visible behind the tinted windows. Sunglasses reflecting the evening sun. She was watching us, not patrolling. Watching. Her clipboard was probably in the passenger seat. Her purse, stuffed with more chains and notices, at her side. She had no idea what was coming. Lisa glanced toward the window. She's not just annoying. She's dangerous. I looked down at the scratched armrest of Emily's chair, then to the photo of the chain on my desk. She chained my daughter. She's going down. Karen thought she was untouchable, but my FBI friend and I were about to bury her with her own secrets. On the morning of July 10th, I heard a knock at the door just after sunrise. Mark Davis stood there in his navy windbreaker, FBI badge clipped discreetly at his hip, holding a worn leather laptop bag. We hadn't seen each other in years, but he hadn't changed. Calm, calculating, and allergic to bullies. "You weren't kidding," he said, stepping into my home office. "Chaining your daughter? She's out of her mind." He sat up on my oak desk, pushing aside stacks of Emily's old sketches and half-finished car repair manuals. His FBI-issued laptop powered up with a quiet hum. The room smelled faintly of old coffee grounds and printer toner. Emily peeked in from the hallway, clutching her notebook. "Hi, Agent Davis," she said shyly. "Just Mark," he replied with a smile. "We're going to get justice for you, Emily." With a few keystrokes, Mark began digging into HOA public filings, cross-referencing Karen's name, property records, and board expenditures. Meanwhile, Bill showed up, lugging a flash drive. "Got something from a friend," Bill said, eyes darting behind him as if Karen might burst out of the bushes. The drive contained internal HOA financial statements, a leak from a former board member who'd finally had enough. One name kept popping up in the disbursements: Mitchell Consulting. "That her married name?" Mark asked. "Yep. Her husband bailed a few years ago. Took the dog in the mailbox," Bill quipped. Mitchell Consulting had received $15,000 in payments over the past 18 months, classified as consulting and community management services. But the company didn't exist outside of a P.O. box and a Gmail address tied to Karen herself. "This is sloppy," Mark muttered. "Shell company. She's funneling HOA funds into her own account." He kept typing, cross-checking the email address through public records. Then he froze. "She filed for a domain name last year, mitchellconsultingohio.com. Listed a personal cell number. Guess whose number?" He turned the screen toward me. It was the same one Karen used in the HOA welcome packet. There it was. Fraud. Clear as day. But it wasn't just financial corruption. Mark also flagged one particular HOA email sent from Karen's board address in April. "We need to look into removing residents who don't reflect the community aesthetic. That includes the mailbox guy and that wheelchair girl." "That's discriminatory," Mark said. "Combined with the chaining incident, it's a Fair Housing Act violation. Think it'll stick? Between this and false imprisonment, it's more than a slap on the wrist. It's criminal. And if she moved those funds across state lines, which I suspect, this becomes federal fraud." I sat back in my chair, stunned. We had her. Lisa arrived with a folder of signed statements from other neighbors. Tom, who got fined for Christmas lights. Sarah, the gnome victim. They'd all seen Karen's clipboard tyranny firsthand. Clip-clopping across driveways. Purse swinging like a weapon. Sunglasses glinting like some HOA Judge Dredd. Lisa's video. Bill's notes, the chain photos. and the emails were organized into a digital dossier. I printed it all, slipped it into a black binder, and titled it in Sharpie, Karen's Crimes. Meanwhile, Karen must have felt the ground shifting beneath her. That afternoon, she parked her silver SUV outside my house, engine idling. I stood on the porch, staring her down. She raised her phone and started filming, then shouted, "This is harassment. You're threatening me. Filming your porch now counts as evidence." Mark muttered behind me, snapping a photo of her SUV. The next morning, I received an email from the HOA account. Subject line in all caps: "Cease and desist. $1,000 fine for slander." She accused me of defamation, public disturbance, and undermining community integrity. Undermining integrity? Lisa laughed. "She's embezzling HOA money. We documented everything." Mark took screenshots of her email and began contacting legal channels. Emily, quiet but present, worked steadily on her sketchbook at the dining table. I walked by and saw the drawing. Herself in her wheelchair, scrunchy tight, holding a flaming chain like a warrior. "You're not scared?" asked her. "I am," she said. "But I'm done hiding." That night, the living room was alive with quiet planning. My old toolbox sat near the fireplace, chain and padlock tucked inside. The scratch on Emily's wheelchair remained. A scar, a reminder. Mark stapled the last pages of the dossier. Lisa paced. Bill scrolled X, grinning. "Posted a teaser," he said. "Didn't name her yet, but it's getting attention. Hashtag HOA Karen is picking up steam." Outside, Karen's SUV rolled past again. Slower this time. Inside, my daughter drew herself not as a victim, but as a force. Karen had started a war. We were going to end it. The HOA meeting was our stage to expose Karen, but she was ready to fight dirty. July 15th, 7 p.m. The Oakwood Estates clubhouse was packed, humid, and buzzing with whispered anticipation. 60 residents filled the plastic folding chairs, fanning themselves with flyers Karen had printed about community order. At the front stood her infamous bulletin board, plastered with her signature neon yellow rule notices like propaganda posters. The projector screen flickered weakly behind her, and someone had set out a lukewarm coffee pot and stale cookies, as if they'd distract from the battle about to unfold. I stood at the back, black binder in hand. Inside, the chain photos, Karen's embezzlement trail, Fair Housing Act violations, video evidence, witness statements, and her damning emails. Lisa and Bill flanked me like lieutenants. Emily sat quietly near the exit, her wheelchair gleaming in the overhead light, the scratch on its armrest still visible. Her sketchbook rested in her lap. She didn't say much. She didn't have to. At exactly 7:05, Karen strode to the podium, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her head despite the dim light. "Let's begin," she announced. "We'll be discussing recent violations, including slanderous behavior and unauthorized gatherings." Before she could launch into another sanctimonious speech, I walked to the front and placed the binder on the table with a thud. "We need to discuss your criminal behavior first." The room went still. Karen blinked. "Excuse me?" I opened the binder and held up a photo. Emily's wheelchair chained to the park fence. "This is what you did. This is false imprisonment." Gasps rippled through the room. I clicked the remote. The projector lit up, displaying a close-up of the chain, the lock, the scratches on the chair. I cycled through more. Karen's SUV, the padlock, her HOA email calling Emily that wheelchair girl. Then Lisa stepped forward and played her phone video. Karen's voice screaming, "Your mutt's a nuisance. Her reign of terror isn't just petty fines anymore." Lisa said, holding the phone high, "It's dangerous." Karen's composure cracked slightly. "This is slander. Lies. That's my private property you're sharing." "Then explain this," I said, clicking again. An image of the HOA's financial records showing $15,000 paid to Mitchell Consulting. Karen's face blanched. "Mitchell Consulting is a fake company. It's registered to a P.O. box and her personal email. It's embezzlement. Fraud," I said. "And this email?" I tapped the screen. highlighting her discriminatory line about removing me and the wheelchair girl. This violates federal housing law. Bob and Susan tried to intervene. Karen's always acted in the community's best interest, Bob said, standing. This is a smear campaign. Bill called. Bill stepped up, holding his spiral notebook like a holy relic. Karen's issued 47 fines in 2 years. For bird feeders, wind chimes, one woman's American flag, and my grandson's sidewalk chalk. She fined Sarah $150 for a garden gnome. Sarah, seated in the second row, stood up. And then she called it a threat to neighborhood character. It was a gnome. People started murmuring louder now. Gasps whispered agreement. Karen's clipboard began to shake in her hand. She snapped. This is a witch hunt. I've worked tirelessly for this neighborhood. You're all ungrateful. Her voice climbed to a screech. Jack Thompson, you're fired from the landscaping committee. Karen, I said, stepping forward. You chained my daughter to a fence. That's not leadership. That's criminal. And then, just as she tried to lunge at the binder, knocking over a pitcher of water that soaked her blazer, the clubhouse door opened. Mark walked in, flanked by 2 men in suits. Karen Mitchell, he announced, holding out a badge. You're under arrest for embezzlement, false imprisonment, and violation of the Fair Housing Act. The crowd went silent again as the agent stepped forward. Karen's sunglasses tumbled from her head and clattered to the floor. Her purse fell open, revealing her clipboard, a spare padlock, and a laminated HOA rules booklet. You can't do this. I am the HOA, she shrieked. You were, Mark said coolly. Save it for court. They cuffed her, hands behind her back, and led her toward the exit. She screamed, I'm the victim. This is harassment. But no one moved to help. Bill lifted his phone and hit record. Smile for the internet, Karen. By the time they got her to the squad car, the ex-post already had 50,000 views under #HOA Karen. Emily smiled faintly from the back row, watching justice unfold. I walked over and gently squeezed her hand. She looked up at me and whispered, Thank you, Dad. Tom and Sarah stood clapping. Lisa hugged her daughter. Neighbors high-fived. Karen supporters, Bob, Susan, quietly slipped out the side door, defeated and ashamed. The projector screen flickered again, now showing a photo Emily had drawn of the park. It was peaceful, warm, without chains, without fear. For the first time in years, Oakwood Estates felt like a neighborhood again. Karen's cuffs were a start, but the real victory was our community's rebirth. August 10, 2023. I sat in the Franklin County courtroom, hands clasped, watching Karen Mitchell avoid eye contact with everyone. She wore a wrinkled gray suit, no sunglasses, no clipboard. Just the look of someone who had finally realized the game was over. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs as the judge read out the charges. False imprisonment under Ohio Revised Code Section 2905.03. Embezzlement under 18 U.S.C. Section 641. Fair Housing Act violations for discrimination against a disabled resident. The evidence spoke for itself. Mark's financial trail, Bill's notebook, Lisa's video, my photos, the damning emails. The FBI traced her shell company to a Florida bank account, confirming federal fraud. The paper trail was as neat as her old HOA fines, only this time she was on the receiving end. The judge sentenced her to 5 years in prison and ordered $20,000 in restitution to the HOA and affected residents, including Emily. Outside the courthouse, news vans waited. Someone had brought a sign. No more HOA Karens. Cameras snapped as Karen was escorted into a cruiser. Expression blank, hands bound. Her purse, clipboard, and laminated rulebook now belonged to the FBI's evidence locker. But what happened next was even better. 2 days later, on August 12th, we held a community vote, with Karen banned from any HOA role. Lisa Evans was elected president in a landslide. First order of business: repeal half the rules Karen had abused. Petty fines were eliminated. Accessibility ramps were ordered for the park. A new rule was passed: no enforcement without empathy. And then came Emily, inspired by everything she'd endured and the support she'd received. She launched the Freedom to Roll Fund, a scholarship for disabled youth in Columbus. She posted about it once on social media, and donations poured in. Within 48 hours, neighbors, allies, and total strangers raised over $10,000. I want kids like me to have more than fences and fear, she said during a live stream from our porch, her repaired wheelchair gleaming in the sun. Her scrunchie fluttered gently in the breeze. By August 15th, we threw the biggest event Oakwood Estates had ever seen. Unity Day. Families gathered in the same park where Karen had once patrolled like a warden. Now it echoed with laughter, grill smoke, and live music. A giant banner read, "We took our neighborhood back." I stood at the grill flipping burgers, my old blue ceramic mug glued back together, sitting proudly on the picnic table beside me. Bill wore a shirt that said "Gnome Lives Matter." Lisa had a clipboard, but it was decorated in stickers and held only Unity Day games and food sign-ups. Emily gave a short speech from under the elm tree, her elm tree. "Thank you," she said, "for fighting for me and with me. We showed that kindness is stronger than chains." Applause erupted. Her sketchbook sat open beside her, revealing a drawing of the park, a shining wheelchair under the elm, surrounded by neighbors smiling, not watching. Karen's name was barely mentioned anymore. Rumors swirled that she'd been banned from HOAs statewide. Some said she was petitioning to start a new one in rural Florida. We didn't care. We'd moved on. The chain and padlock, we donated them to the Columbus Suburban History Museum, where they now hang in an exhibit called HOA Horrors, Suburbia's Darkest Tales. A plaque underneath reads, "Used by a tyrant, broken by a father." Emily rolled up beside me later that evening, her sketch of the barbecue nearly finished. "You good?" asked. She looked around, neighbors laughing, children chasing bubbles, Bill telling stories, Mark sipping a beer by the fence. "The fence? I'm great," she said, "and I'm free." I wrapped an arm around her shoulders and smiled as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. For the first time in years, peace didn't feel like a dream. It felt like home.